He is a longtime radio disc jockey in the Detroit area. If you guys are familiar with the WRIF, excuse me, the Riff. He's been having a long-going program there called ChopShop. And he's also an author now of a second book that just dropped, and we'll get into those discussions now. But please, everyone, welcome Steve Black.
Awesome.
Hi, Steve. I want to start real quick and say something real quick. I was going through all of the little notables for you, and I went on deep dive in the internet. You know, I know Steve from the Riff and Steve from ChopShop. I don't know Steve in all these other spaces, and I had no clue that you've been in radio for 31 years this year. Holy shit. Congrats, man.
That is pretty trippy. Yep.
How is that possible for someone who's only 40 years old?
I don't know why wifey and I look younger than we are, but we're
you know why? I'll tell you why. Knowing you guys fully well, you're incredibly positive people, so that keeps you young. And secondly, you're doing what you fucking love.
Yeah.
So you're adding years to your life, and Chad knows that too, man. I know sometimes it feels like a grind, but at the end of the day, you're like, I'm so stoked and blessed to be doing what I'm doing that it's not aging me like I would in any other job. It might age you, but extends. What's that called? Come on, you're the author. Give me a word.
Stem cells? Is that what you're talking
about?
There
we go. Stem cells. Well, okay, talking about science, I'd really like to get into your new book really quickly, Last Child.
Yeah.
And it is a book that I'm going to want you to explain about, folks, but I have to ask when there you go, right there.
Prop.
When we go to our live segment, I definitely want you to show folks what that is so they know what to look for when they're looking you up to purchase that book. But when I first heard it, I was like, well, you know what? Is he naming it after the Aerosmith song? I thought, well, this sounds like he's inspired by Brad Whitford.
Sure, of course.
But obviously that's not the case, because I started perusing and see what the idea and concept of the book was. I was like, I guess I'm kind of far off here. So tell us, man, how did this one come to be? Obviously, you're a huge science fiction fan.
Yeah, I really am. I love regular science and I love science fiction. But as far as the way this came to be, it really came out of, and I even mentioned at the very end of the book that in an incredibly twisted, weird way, that I almost see this book as a sequel. And my first book was an autobiography, which is 100% true, at least to the best of my recollection. And this is total science fiction. But where that twist comes in is I lost my first wife. She died at the age of 35. And we had this 6-year cancer battle. And afterwards, I was just pissed. I was pissed that science couldn't cure her. I was pissed that God would choose to take somebody who was so full of life and didn't want to die. And so I thought, if I could create this world where I could set the rules, essentially play God, then I could dance in that world and let those two sides fight it out. I could let the science and the religion sort of both be broken and see if I could find a place to live in that world. That's where the idea came from.
I love that. Also, it's on every level. I think it's romantic as well as probably the darkest. It's like a dance with the devil, a romantic dance with the devil. When you think about it, how you're able to create, pull, push all of the things that happen in life in this world inside of your head that then you decimate upon pages. But leading up to this, you had to go through some really dark places to figure out where the light, and you had the tool to find the light and tell a story the way you wanted it. I've been reading the book. I was going to ask where Kyle kind of came from, but now this makes sense. Okay. Well, then I'll shut up and let you tell us more about it.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask when I started looking at the book and the idea of, and I don't want to give too much away, but the last child on Earth, I thought about growing up, a big cult movie for me, and it was also shot where I lived, was Logan's Run, where basically, and no one was allowed to live past 25.
Right.
So it always struck me is that the ageism, which in a lot of ways revolves around the idea of astrophysics. I even know astrophysics about the birth of planets, but I'm thinking about birth of life as well, how that plays into your writing. And basically ageism is almost seen as either something you worship or something that needs to be eradicated.
Yeah. What I was where I ultimately ended up, I should say, I don't think I started with the concept, but where I ended up with it is I kind of started backwards. Like if you look at evolution, at some point we were Cro-Magnon, and then at some point we're not. When did that stop? There wasn't just one person, right? We just slowly evolved past it. So in a world where nobody can be born, then the next logical step is to extend life, extend. And if we do that to the point of adding cybernetics, adding artificial cells to replace our natural cells, at what point in that forced evolution are we no longer human? And then also the big question, does it matter if we're no longer human? If that's part of the evolution, did it matter to Cro-Magnon that he's no longer Cro-Magnon? Like, where is that in the evolution? So that was the question I was asking. What does it mean to be human? And is it even important to be human?
Do you invest in Dogecoin?
I haven't.
I don't know if you've had a moment to like go into like what I heard you say. My brain immediately went to the Neuralink, right? And the why it is the developing the AI. Developing it to conquer the AI so that we can extend our life. And a complete, obviously this is like a whole new world to converse with anybody about. But I fucking love the fact that your mind. This is awesome, dude.
Yeah, this is where my brain went. I mean, So.
It's seriously interesting that the idea of humans evolving to the point where they become almost droids and doesn't matter anymore. At that point, you say, did God fail? And science took over.
Right. Or even was that God's plan? Because, you can define God a million
He wanted to wash
ways.
his hands of you. I'm done with you guys. I'm turning you into droids. I'm out. Peace.
You can, I think one of the great things about being human is we can all kind of choose what God is to us. And the way I picture a God is that that being has the power to force you to do whatever you want. And the very first thing it gave you was life. And the very second thing it gave you was freedom to choose. You choose, you decide. Here's your playground, go figure it out. And so that's kind of how I built the book too. Like I said, I kind of stepped into the shoes of God for a second. All right, I'm going to create a world where there is a massive problem. We're facing extinction. I set my own rules and then I had to deal with it. Those were the rules that were set. Now I can't break those rules, write a story.
How long have you thought about God the way that you're describing the way that you think about it now?
I just think probably most of my life. I mean, it evolves and it gets more complicated.
Sure.
I came up with, and again, this was centered around, losing loved ones, but I came up with this idea of time being spherical and the God essence, whatever it is, existing within that sphere, right? So if you're within the sphere and time takes place on the skin of this expanding bubble, then from the God perspective, you're equally as close to the past as you are to the now, as you are to the future. Therefore, every moment matters because it's all equal distance. It's all has happened, will happen, and is happening. And if that's true, then we matter. Yeah. And so I don't know. I don't know exactly when I came up with that concept, but that helped me be okay. It helped me kind of accept some of the things that have happened in my life that I don't like.
I'm not a religious person. I was kicked out of church at a young age by no virtue of my own. Just I was going to Boy Scouts, right? And the churches where they put God in their like motto at the time period. They're like, you can choose one or the other. And I was like, well, I like regatta races and making kick-ass sailboats. I'm going to do this, right? But I think that's what I've learned from all the people who have been super close to me, who are super close to God. I take a step back, and I used to be a little bit more like a anarchist cookbook about this when I was younger. But as I get older, I understand that everybody needs their needs their thumb to touch something. There has to be a burner. It has to be hot and it has to be cold. Something has to make sense for the way that you're feeling. With all of that being, so, I mean, that makes total sense. But with all of that, I mean, what are you going to say if like the flat earthers were right?
Well, they're not.
Yeah. Oh, I know. But like,
one
just
of my
like
favorite...
think about it. Like, think about it for a moment.
But one of my favorite T-shirts is "Science doesn't care what you believe."
Yeah.
So believe it all you want. Science doesn't care.
I know.
Well, belief, like faith, is always changing and it's evolving as well. And science is not cement. It's always changing as well. You know,
Yes.
So they're always in flux. You know, there's no concrete anything, at least with those things. The only concrete thing in the world is birth and death.
In taxes. Well, no, I guess not really, right?
Cal Ripken Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like an interesting example of that, Justin, would be, you know, since we live in gravity constantly, we can't really imagine a place without it. Like you see a giant boulder and you think about how heavy that is. But if that were in absolute outer space, it has no weight. The weight is the effect of gravity from the two masses, the giant mass of the earth and the tiny mass of the boulder. That creates a push-pull, which creates weight. But in outer space, it weighs nothing. But we think weight is constant. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's only constant here.
Yeah.
Well, in New Orleans, I live below sea level, so it's super gravity here. We have super gravity here, and it weighs you down like you're walking in cement boots.
Wow.
So yes, I agree.
The band Wilson that I was in, as you know, Kyle, I don't know if you've had these conversations, but these are the type of conversations at night Kyle and I would have in the van. It seems to me that you've mastered what Kyle did, not to say that he couldn't master it, but you've mastered the art form of words in presenting this sort of similar trajectory of a story, and I think it's cool.
On God, I think it was the last ShipRocked. It might have been 2 ago. Once you've done 8, they kind of blur together which ones were which.
Right.
But Kyle and I kept saying, you know, right on the first night, we're going to find a night where we're going to have, like, you know, physics conversation night. We're going to find 5 or 6 people like us, and we're going to find a spot under the stars on the ship, and we're going to have the conversation. And then of course it didn't happen, and it's all right, we'll do it tonight, and then it didn't happen, and then we'll do it tomorrow, and then it didn't happen. It never ended up happening. But boy, we really wanted to do the, you know, Star Talk Club on the ship somewhere.
That's actually not Justin. I think that's like a really cool like idea of
no, I think we should have like a little lounge hub, and it should have a sign outside like brains only.
Yeah.
You know?
Only.
Adults only. There's serious convo going on here. It's funny you talk about the idea of people at some point they just give up on the idea of being humans and they switch toward this kind of like robotic, kind of like non-human self. I mean, we're becoming very comfortable of that through science fiction movies, novels such as yourself, even albums like Rush, 2112, but even more so now in the world of AI. You know, the simulation's always going. You don't know what's what anymore. And so it's really interesting that plays into what you're doing as far as your writing as well, like the idea of people evolving from Cro-Magnon to what we call human, and then slowly moving into like, well, basically mechanisms, whatever you want to call it. It's an interesting concept, and it's not so much the concept, but it's the idea that humans get okay with it. It's conditioning, right?
Yeah.
We're conditioned with the okayness of, I can live forever through AI. I'm like, well, maybe that's not something you want to be doing, you know? Maybe sometimes 75 years is long fucking enough with you, Junior.
Yeah, well, I get into a lot of, I try to paint, you know, a realistic picture. Like one of the things that immediately suffers when people suddenly start to live an incredibly long time, and by the way, cannot have children, is marriages. They more or less disappear.
Yes. Unless you have an agreement, obviously kind of written into what you're doing when you get married, like we want to be together because we dig each other, but let's not worry about the kids thing. Is let's just gather a lot of animals or what the hell we're going to do in order to kind of substitute for whatever they think they need, that hole that we might consider having in our lives.
Right. And then you have just the philosophical thing of, you know, most people collect stuff.
Children.
And yeah, I mean, the goal is to
Yeah.
leave that to your children and to your grandchildren and to their grandchildren. And when you don't have that, there's suddenly not a need to collect those things.
Wouldn't it be an interesting concept, though, to basically be able to say, hey, we have 3 or 4 kids, but you leave them nothing, not in the sense of nothing financial, but you leave them no memories of you. You leave no pictures, no need of artifacts, no furniture, no china that they have to deal with. And they just basically have to use you as a memory, and then they have to create their own. And they kind of pass this on. We're basically a clutter-free existence.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very Black Mirror of you.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask you one more question about the book? Because you have 31 years of radio experience. We probably should talk about some of that too. Why Kyle Jordan? Why is that the name?
I'm sorry. It just triggered a very funny memory for me. I was trying out some of these ideas on a coworker of mine at WRIF. His name's Al Beck. And he and I are close enough that I could share, here's a philosophy, here's a thought on God, here's a thought on, whole brain emulation. And he goes, well, you have a name for the character? And I go, yeah, Kyle Jordan. And he goes, wow, that's really biblical. And I went, yeah, actually, I took 2 different Green Lanterns and put their names together.
Oh, the actors that played,
like people who took the ring and became the Green Lantern.
Right.
There were, there were 3 or 4 different people who did that over the course of time. So I believe Justin mentioned that I'm kind of a sci-fi nerd.
Yeah.
Wow. Which leads me to a question. Growing up, I don't know about you, Steve, but I grew up reading Bradbury before he became Bradbury as we know him. He used to write children's books regarding space travel and stuff. It made it very simplistic and easy to understand for a young mind to grasp. Was that something you did as well? I mean, I even got the G.I. Joe space locker, when G.I. Joe was an astronaut in 71, 72, when the space program was going and they were kind of following these trends. Did you grow up in the same manner?
Yeah, I kind of immediately, though, at least one of the very early memories I have, I know when other people had, their little sports dolls or whatever, I had all the Planet of the Apes. I had Cornelius and I had Zara and I just remember kind of living in that world of sci-fi. That was my first love of science fiction. I did get into books later, but it was sci-fi that got me interested in reading. When I read the normal books in school, I always struggled with it. And I found out later from talking to other authors that kind of what I was doing was I would get comfortable with their characters. And then when I would put the book down and go to sleep, in my mind, I would have those characters continue their adventures. And then those adventures were more stimulating to me than what the author was giving me. When I found sci-fi, that was no longer true because it was more in the direction of what I was interested in. It had nothing to do with the author. It was just what piqued my interest and my curiosity. So I started reading sci-fi, and then suddenly I couldn't put the book down because I couldn't come up with ideas that were better than what they were doing, or more interesting to me, I should say.
That's really interesting. You just gave some insight into yourself with the Planet of the Apes thing, speaking about Cro-Magnon and then evolving. Well, obviously the apes never really evolved. They evolved mentally, physically on how to deal with tools and commerce and everything else, and obviously hunting, trapping, but they never evolved out of their skin and fur. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
But Chad said you were 31 years in the radio business. Obviously, there's a lot of questions to ask you regarding the changes of having those kind of really organic teams of jocks and people that worked and did the satellite things you guys are going out and doing, the remotes, to basically being programmed by a computer.
It's night and day.
Yeah.
I have been blessed in those 31 years to do almost every job available in the radio industry, and certainly every shift, from the overnight to, big morning show as the co-host of the Ted Nugent show. I mean, that was a pretty significant talk show to be a co-host of. I did middays, I did afternoon drive. I've done it all.
Were you one of those kids that started in radio and emptying out the program director's waste bins? those kind of jobs too, or did you just go right into being a personality?
So I started as an audio engineer, and I actually started in recording studios, and that got me to recording commercials, which got my foot in the door at a radio station. And I started in production, just, recording commercials. And then, we had a giant snowstorm in Flint, Michigan, which is where I'm from originally. And I was the only one at the station. So they were like, hey, any chance you can go on the air? You betcha I can go on.
Mother Nature intervened.
You just go into the bathroom and you're like, welcome to the whatever they call it.
Were you one of those guys? Were you one of those guys? It wasn't. A lot of people hate the sound of their own voice. I mean, I have for the longest time. Now I don't know when to shut up. Were you one of those guys? Were you nervous about it? Were you like, "That's my voice? Do I have a voice radio? Do I not the talent, but like, are people going to listen to me? Are they going to resonate? Is my voice going to resonate with them?"
I never thought about it too much, and my family and even friends have kind of recounted things that are blurry memories for me. But apparently I used to make mixtapes for them and talk in between the songs, even as like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old. So I just have always heard my voice.
Well, I mean, gee, Steve, you just took the fucking romance out of it, dude. People are supposed to decipher for themselves what this mix is about. Now you're giving them play-by-play.
This next song.
The mood. Yeah.
Music is no longer subjective. It is only objective. My objective is get you to love me. The question I have, because I have a lot, but you said something about this is totally off before we get into the deepest dive. You said it started with audio recording and making commercials.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Ernest? Like the story of Ernest, the character?
No.
Okay. We don't have to waste any time talking about this right now. I was hoping that you said, of course I am. But the short of it is Ernest was making commercials that nobody asked for. The character Ernest is just him being like, do you like whatever dairy product, whatever, like we have, what's the farm place that serves our milk here around here? Whatever the milk farm is. He would make these commercials on VHS and send them in and be like, if you need a commercial, I got one for you. And hundreds of these tapes, right?
Wow.
And so I was going to follow this up with like when you were doing this, because obviously the snowstorm came and you were stuck in the thing. You're like, okay, I have all this experience of audio recording. Did you just like fucking destroy it that night? And people were just like, okay, you're fired, Gary. Come on over in here, Steve. Like, what was the next day like for you at that moment?
What was funny was the program director called me maybe 20 minutes after I had done my, I'm 20 minutes into the show that's going to last for 3 or 4 hours. He goes, I thought you said you've never been on the air before. I'm like, yeah, I haven't. Oh, I'm sorry. He goes, I thought you said you've never done this before. I said, no, I said, I've never been on the air before. I've been doing it since I was 3, in my bedroom. I just, it never went beyond the walls before, but he was like, dude, you're killing it. Just keep going.
Did he call?
Oh, I lost you.
I lost you too, Chad. I'll ask a question while he's reconnecting. Sure. Do you remember the first record you ever queued up on your own? Not that was on a playlist, but you had basically it's Steve's free hour on the radio. Do you remember the first record you ever queued up?
Yes, because it was also the very first CD I ever bought. And it turned out to be a band that would interact and intermingle in my life many times. It was Sabotage was the band, and the song was Gutter Ballet.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. So 1989. So my very first, I don't know if it was my first shift on the radio, but it was certainly the first or second. Yeah.
And were you guys doing, at that point, you guys switched over to digital format then, and you were no longer doing albums?
That station, because we're going back to 1989, still had like pots, like dials and stuff. We didn't even have faders. So everything was on carts, which looked like old 8-track tapes. Yep. Those are radio carts, but they had a CD player in the production library. And so I had bought a couple of CDs because I thought I was I got to have the coolest form of music. And so I went and got the CD player from the production studio and brought it into the Air studio and routed it. Now I can play Sabotage.
Yeah. And was the people at your station, the program director, or who was running those shows at that period of time, were they just like, oh, were you just like blowing their mind? Because that's all I can think of is like, you're getting to go at bat, you grand slam it, and then you follow it up with the next time that you get the swing, you're on base. That's like, like the continuation of the game is now you're bringing in a new form of media. Am I understanding that correctly? Or did they already understand this could be possible?
I think they knew about CDs, obviously. I just, there just wasn't a player in the studio. At that point, it was just too new. And even if you had one, there were probably only 5 CDs in the building.
So 89, did you get to a point where you had to play Sweet Child of Mine every hour on the hour?
I don't recall that being the song that I played every hour, but I've had those songs a few times in my career. Yeah, I've had a few that there are a few songs that are unbelievably great songs that are legendary songs that I don't need to ever hear again, ever.
Yeah,
and I love them, but I don't need to hear them.
Yeah,
of the 2,500 plus shows and specials that you have syndicated, that you have had put in syndication, and that is aired over across 170 radio stations in the United States, how many of those shows do you think that you played that specific song, "Sweet Child of Mine"?
Oh my, I don't know, but a bunch. I mean, that is a song I have played a crazy number of times.
Over 100.
Yeah.
Oh, way over 100. Yes.
Okay.
In my career, way over. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, Steve, I used to do a midnight to 3 a.m. shift in Dallas.
Yes.
Obviously, it was pre-programmed. The only thing it wasn't programmed was me speaking at commercial time and break time. Everything else was loaded in, pre-programmed. Have you ever had a point in your life where you get the list and you're like, oh, this is the songs I got to play? You ever just deviated from that, maybe caught a little bit of heat from the station manager or anything like that? Have you ever done it just to be a little rebellious?
Yes, is the easy answer. Some of the stations I worked at, there was an okay amount of freedom to do some of that stuff, mainly in the 90s. We had some of that kind of freedom. Nowadays, where you don't have to queue up the music or anything, it's all just in a computer and it comes to you. I still will do it a little bit, but that's the reason you have a live person in the studio versus most radio stations, which don't have a live person in the studio.
Correct.
If you suddenly are asking me to play a really down, dreary number in November because it's cold and rainy, but it's not, and I look out the window and the sun's blazing and it's a rare sunny day in Detroit in November, well, dude, I'm not playing that song. I'm going to break out Paradise City. Like,
you're supposed to play November Rain, but instead you go Paradise City.
Right. Depending on the weather, depending on what's going on, depending on the sporting events. Just, yes, you've got to be, if you're live and local, you have an advantage over Spotify. And that is to essentially read the room, and the room is your city.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, real quick, guys, before we go to live on a good commercial break. Hey, folks, at this time, we'd like to remind you that not only are you listening to a kick-ass podcast right now, but we also produce an amazing rock music-themed cruise called ShipRocked. We'll be sailing to Costa Maya and Cozumel on our 12th voyage in January 2022. Sail away into metal oblivion, into metal oblivion with Lamb of God, I Prevail, From Ashes to New, Steel Panther, and many more. So please, if you are interested, we still have cabins available at ShipRocked.com. So go to ShipRocked.com, pick up your cabin, and join us, please, in January. And with that said, we'll get back to our interview and podcast. Getting ready to go live stream here with Steve Black, and we are now live. So, Steve, say hi to the Facebook world.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Good to see you, Steve, on the internet. Good to see you on the internet with us. On the internet, we're all together.
Yeah, I'm going to share it real quick. My own self sharing. Okay.
Well, guys, real preoccupied with sharing what's going on right now. If you guys know Steve and his wife Gina, beautiful, wonderful people. They're part of the ShipRocked family. Steve, obviously, when you guys do meet and greets, you see him giving a lot of interviews for his ChopShop show, which I think, Steve, can be found on WRIF, the Riff in Detroit. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's just the easiest place. That's my home station and has
Yeah.
been for 18, almost 19 years now. Yeah.
Okay. You can also go to ChopShop.com to check out Steve's stuff. Look at past archival interviews he's done, which are, well, thousands. And then also check out his newest book, The Last Child, and his prior book to that. You can go purchase those and get a synopsis of what those books are about. There, look at that right there. That right there is a salesman, folks. That's how you do it. From Black to Light and The Last Child, those two of his books. So again, thank you for joining us. We're right now in the midst of talking about Steve's 31-year radio career. So let's get back to it with Chad and Steve.
Yeah, man, real quick. I mean, I know, but I'm not sure everybody here that's listening knows. 31 years in radio. You started your first time on, we were just talking about the first time you've been on air live. Was that in Flint at WDLZ?
Yep.
Flushing, I guess, right? Is that where it was located? And it was a stormy, rainy, or snowy night, and you were the only person at the station. This is like Airhead style. This is like what Brendan Fraser was like begging for it to happen to him. So like you farted on the snare drum, you were Pip, you went on and crushed it. They gave you a gig, fired Gary or whoever, and now you were there for how many years before you moved to came to Detroit?
I was only there for 1 year before the station kind of went under.
Okay, are you to blame for that?
I was not.
No, that'd be the salespeople who didn't move enough automotive ads. Chad.
I'm joking.
But I was only out of radio for about a year, and then a Z-Rock opened in Detroit. And I did something that is very, very uncharacteristic of me. More so back, I mean, it's more like the old version of me back then, not like the version of me now. But I made contact with the program director, and I said, I know the music better than you do. I live the lifestyle. I know these bands. I go to these shows. You need me. Yeah. And I thought I'd blown the interview. And I didn't hear from him for 3 weeks. And thank God when he called, he said, you know what? That kind of pissed me off a little bit when you said it. But the more I thought about it, you're right. You know this music better than me. You know these bands. You live it. You're hired. And that was
now. Let me ask the
that was in
guy
Detroit. You know,
have you met this guy before? Giving him all of that,
nope.
Laying him to waste and making him curl up fetal in the corner for 3 weeks.
Nope.
When you met him, did you go, "Yep, I was accurate about this"? As he adjusted his pager on his belt, on his pleated slacks, held up by his web belt, he was adjusting his pager, and you nailed it. That's the guy you were dealing with.
He told me, look, hey, we just changed formats from the jazz station, and I'm the program director from the jazz station, and I don't know this stuff as well. And I was bold. I'm like, I do. You need me.
Was the jazz station called the Oasis?
I don't remember.
They're all called the Oasis, man.
Yeah, nowadays they all are. I think it was. I honestly don't remember what it was called. But that was the start, and we did some crazy, incredible things at Z-Rock. You know, the vulgar display of parties where we did Pantera 3 different nights in a row in 3 different venues in Detroit, and you could buy 1 ticket and go to all 3 parties. You know, I mean, it was like,
was that at Harpo's?
Nobody did that.
Was one of the nights at Harpo's?
Yes.
Was the other one at IROC?
I think so, and the other was the State Theater.
Oh shoot, I remember this.
Yeah, the vulgar display of parties.
I was really young, yeah.
I mean, you know, we did crazy stuff like that all the time. We did a show with Tool. In fact, I don't think you can see it here, but my very first platinum album I ever got was being among, I don't know if I was the first, but among the first people in radio to play Tool on commercial radio. And we did a show with them at the Phoenix Plaza Amphitheater, which means nothing to anybody who doesn't live in Detroit, but I mean, there was 15 people there. Nobody knew them.
You know, that was the great thing about even back then. I mean, that album was obviously a long time ago, but in the context of things, it used to be where the Midwest, whether it's Cleveland or Detroit, were the ones breaking bands. It wasn't the West or East Coast. Everything now works from the West Coast over because of programming standards. But back then, you guys could do those outliers and create. We all know the famous thing of Rush, how Cleveland found it out, played Working Man, and that went from there. So this is a great example of the Midwest always having actually a much better gauge on taste and longevity of artists than the West or East Coast could ever fucking have.
Yeah, I one of my great heroes in life was Paul O'Neill, who a producer, but best known for putting together the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And he told me back when he worked with, Lieber Krebs, and back when he helped bring the Scorpions across from Germany to America, that Detroit was their proving ground. These guys were New York guys through and through, but they knew that if you broke a band in Detroit, the world would accept them. If you broke a band in New York, America might accept them, but you didn't know about the world. And I was like, okay. I mean, I was a young kid at that point. I didn't know. But
let me ask you this: of all the shows, obviously you had to do a lot of remotes in your career thus far.
Yeah.
What was either the craziest or worst one that you ever dealt with, as far as the situation and what happened?
I'm going to go with the most memorable one. First of all,
okay, that'll work. You're not throwing too many people under the bus.
I got to do a week from a bar that we were giving away through our sponsor Guinness in Ireland. So even though we were in Detroit, we were giving the winner their own bar. They would have to move to Ireland for no less than 3 years and run this bar that we were giving away. And the top of the bar was a home. So you were getting a home and a bar to run, and not in Dublin either, like out in the sticks of Ireland. So I did a week's broadcast from the bar we were giving away with all the locals. And it was crazy. And so there was this one kind of, elderly lady there, and I kept begging her, this thick Irish accent, come be on the radio. No, I can't be on the radio. No, I can't. And on the last day, she comes over and she grabs the microphone and she sticks it in her ear and she goes, "Hello, America. I can't hear you." And I was just like, oh my God, this 85-year-old lady thinks she's supposed to be listening through the microphone. It was just, the whole week was gorgeous and beautiful and stuff I'll never forget. But that was like, what do you do? What do you
was that
say?
The Guinness? Did Guinness fund that, or did you guys fund that? Because that seems like kind of it's quite the undertaking.
Yeah, it was actually, they did it in 10 markets. So it was kind of a 10 market sweepstakes, if you will. And so we were one of 10 radio stations that were there. There was a station there from San Francisco. There was one there from Boston. We were the station representing Detroit. There was, and yeah, Guinness funded it all. They flew all 10 radio stations over, and we all took turns broadcasting and using each other's gear. And it was crazy.
Who won? Who won that?
I couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
It wasn't that lady.
It wasn't that lady, no.
Oh, man.
But that was one of the, talk about doing a remote broadcast. Yeah, go to Ireland for a week.
Yeah. Hey, guys, real quick, if you have any questions for Steve, please post those in the thread. You can talk to him about quantum physics, astrophysics, sci-fi, his books, or you can talk about life and radio, or maybe some artists that he's interviewed over time, see what kind of stories he might have for us. So, Steve, one of the questions I have is, where do you see the future of radio? I mean, we've always heard to me, I see radio, terrestrial radio, not really taking the knock we thought it was good when Sirius came in and kind of took a bite at things. It seems that terrestrial radio is still something that is very prevalent in people's lives, especially at drive time. How do you see it?
Yeah, the research I've seen shows very little deviation from when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you'd listen to the radio, figure out what you like, and then you'd go buy the albums, and you might spend an hour a day listening to your albums. And that hour was time you spent away from the radio. Mm-hmm. And now they found that it's almost identical. People will still go to radio first because that's their local friend, find out what's going on, get the vibe of the music, and then they might go to satellite, or they might go to Spotify, or they might go wherever else they want to deepen their understanding of the things they just heard on the radio. But then they return back to radio. So I think it's good. I think the only thing that is a legitimate danger is the driverless car. I think if we ever get there, that I don't know if radio can recover from that, because the younger generation, especially, if you can play video games because you don't have to drive, if there isn't even a steering wheel, you're just in a car that drives itself, then I think radio's in trouble. But if we don't get to there, I think we're still in a pretty good spot. People seem to still love us, and that's great, obviously, since I spent my
obviously life. A lot of the heritage stations, because it's PB&J for them. There's enough uncertainty in life. It's still nice to have the local radio voice guy, and you kind of know what the playlist is going to be like. growing up in Dallas, the 92.5, you know, I know I'm going to hear Zeppelin. I know I'm going to hear Bad Company. And it's just like wash, rinse, repeat. But sometimes that's so comforting.
Yeah. And the voice, you know, the person talking in between. I think, you know, the station that I'm primarily talking about here today is WRIF. And, you know, this is our 50th anniversary, being the same format. You know, generations have grown up with it. They know what to expect.
Speaking of knowing what to expect, real quick, I want to ask Chad. I'd love to get this question in real quick from Christina. Christina wants to know, you've obviously probably been there many times. Have you been to the machine shop? She goes, it's her favorite venue, and she's from Wisconsin.
For me, yes, of course.
Okay.
It wasn't there when I was growing up, just outside of Flint, but I've been there many, many times. And, you know, I know all the people. Absolutely. I love the machine shop.
Okay.
Are you wearing a machine shop shirt right now?
I am.
That's
funny. Yes, I am.
Well, there you go.
I thought maybe she's going to.
Yes, he has been, and he
hasn't been there before.
Exactly. I wonder if she eyeballed your shirt and asked that question. I don't know. Anyway, Christina, yes, he's probably been there a multitude of times. So.
Yep, lots of great memories up there.
I don't want to deviate away from where we're heading, but real quick, because I have a comment that I wanted to see what you thought about. To me, the future of terrestrial radio is partially of what you guys just described. But to get me to listen more so now when I have the options, and I fall in the middle of that Venn diagram where there's like the streaming services and radio, because I listen to the Riff when but the Riff. I should also preface this saying, as a guy who's been in all of those stations across the United States, the Riff is special. There's not too many rock stations, like you said, that have been around for 50 years and that they have a loyal listenership to where like people get fucking pissed when things change there. With that being said, I would love to tune in and not hear what I think I'm going to hear, but instead hear what Steve or the jock, you know, putting in the programming that you know that you're going to because of the simplicity of what, you know, the research says, but shake it up, you know, and make me feel like the jock, the personality, the voice that I'm listening to is more important than anything else.
Well, it probably won't happen, but I will tell you, for the 50th, they've asked us jocks for ideas. Hey, what should we do that we haven't done in a long time or whatever? And that's basically what I said. I said, let each jock do their own show. Let us program our own show just for a weekend. Let us go and tell the community what they've meant to us, what music has played a role in this 50-year relationship, and let us just go nuts. And, you know, I don't know if they're going to let us do it or not. I wouldn't wager on it, but.
Well, that brings us to ChopShop, right? Isn't that how did ChopShop start and get syndicated the way that it has been?
Oh, okay. So this is an interesting story. I mentioned earlier, if you get a chance to go back and check out the full podcast, my first wife, Sabrina, was also in radio, and she was better known in the Detroit area as a sports personality, but she got cancer very young. She was diagnosed at 29 and died at 35. And for a while, she was so bad that I couldn't really leave the house without essentially getting a babysitter. Like she just couldn't function. You know, at one point she'd fallen and had a head injury. And so things got really, really bad. So I had to find a way to work from home. And I already, being an audio engineer, had a studio already built in my house. And so I said, you know, I need to just do radio from home. And this was really kind of before computers were in every station. And I thought, I just need to do a syndicated show, something I can produce from home and send it out to stations. And man, in those early days, I'm in season 18 of the Chop Shop. Those early days, we used to press the show on CD, and then I would have a multiple CD burner. You'd put the top CD in and a bunch of blanks and burn CDs and then put them in the mail and mail them to all these stations so they could play them. And that's how we started the show. As for, you know, why it's called the Chop Shop and why it's guitar oriented, I was just thinking about guitar being this $1 billion industry and radio basically ignoring it forever. They always just talk about the singer. They always talk about the lyrics. They always talk. And I was like, nobody. So I said, all right, let's do a show where I only interview the guitar players. That's who I talk to. And, you know, I've been doing it for 18 seasons. That's what I do.
So you kind of essentially, and without maybe the programming aspect of it, you did exactly what it was. Is like, we're gonna do it the way that the way that you would like to. Yeah. And now here it is.
Created my show so I could work from home and take care of my wife.
The idea behind the Chop Shop's super interesting, that you only talk with cars. Have you ever had someone like Brad Talinsky or someone from Guitar World reach out to you regarding that? Because it seems like such a crazy little niche that you have there.
Not directly, no. I have had people who know them and people who know me kind of connect the dots between us, but it's just never happened.
That's funny, because you know what I do? I would call that article the spirit of the airwaves.
Yeah,
that'd be great. We have another question here from Karen. Karen wants to know, it's a good one too, it's something we probably should have saved for our own. I would have stolen this idea, but if you had 1 hour to live, listen to on repeat, which song would it be?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. It's one song for 1 hour. Is that what you said?
You have 1 hour left to live. You get one song to listen to on repeat. What song is it?
Oh, God, that's painful. For the Love of God, Steve Vai.
What about that song? What is it about that song that makes you want to be? That's going to be your curtain call.
A lot of things. First of all, just personal memories. That song ties into a lot of important things for me. I have a very unique relationship with Steve. Born out of fear, essentially, and to this day we're still really good friends. 28 years later, and then there's the spiritual side of it. And then there's also the guys who play fast got this reputation of not having any soul, which was incredibly unfair. And that's one of the most soulful, emotional songs I've ever heard from anybody. So it has meanings to me on numerous levels.
Yeah, he's like Satriani in that way. He'll throw that song in that's like a mood piece, a lot of very texturized. It's not all over the map. It's not, he's not killing bees with it. Another question here: I'm curious, who's been your favorite interview subject over all the ones you've done? What one stands out?
My freaking question.
Sorry,
all right.
sorry,
No.
This is from Paul. Yeah. This is all about our viewers here. This is
I know, and I'm changing my question now. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm going to generalize real quick and say that, excuse me, my favorite interviews are always the producers, because they hear music differently than everybody else. And although, sure, I'd love to sit down and talk to David Gilmour, but when I can sit down and talk to Bob Ezrin and get his view of David Gilmour, oh my God, it's goosebumpy. And probably Bob. I mean, Bob was my absolute hero growing up. I was a weird kid, at like 9 years old when most kids don't.
Bob was a weird guy.
Yes. I think I was 9. I might've been 10 when I told my parents I wanted to be a Foley artist, which most people don't even know what that is. That's the guy in TV and film who creates sound, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we have a spaceship or a dinosaur. Well, what does it sound like? We don't know. They don't exist. You've got to create it. And even as a kid, I wanted to create sound. So
I love that, by the way.
It's an interesting article, speaking of Bob Ezrin, that just came out, I think it was Ultimate Rock, talking about Kiss Destroyer and the boot camp that he ran in order to get that album made. And if you go obviously listen to Paul Stanley, it was that era. Bob really loved the blow. So yeah.
There's a couple of pieces of my Bob Ezrin interview in my first book, and he talks about sitting down with Peter Criss and teaching him to play hands and feet independent of each other. Up until he met Bob, Peter couldn't play independent of each other. So.
Which is really weird to hear that when you go back and listen to live and you hear 100,000 Years drum solo and you're like, that fucker's all over the joint. What's he not doing right? So anyway, that's Kiss nerd shit.
Yeah.
ShipRocked. So you've been involved with us for as long as I can remember, 8 years, 9 years. How did you guys find out about us at the time, and how did you get involved?
I met Alan at one of what's the one in Columbus?
Rock on the Range.
Rock on the Range. Yeah, obviously it's changed its name now. I met Alan at Rock on the Range, and he told me about ShipRocked. And I said, well, God, I'd love to, help out any way I can. Here's a couple of ideas. What do you think? And he was like, well, we don't really do much in the way of radio, but yeah, send something to Christine and she'll get it to me. And I did. And he followed up and said, yeah, let's do this. It really was that simple.
It's kind of, it's awesomely like, that story seems like it seems exactly perfect for the ShipRock experience and how the family here orients itself. Had you ever been on a cruise ship in any capacity before this?
Nope. And it is, I've been to thousands of concerts, and maybe half of my top 20 favorite rock and roll memories have taken place on a ship, and I've never been on any other cruise other than ShipRocked. It's unique, and whatever the next step is beyond unique, it's that too.
That's coming from a guy
Scrumtralescent.
Yeah, who like he went to not Scotland. You went to no, it wasn't Scotland. Where's Dublin, right?
Oh, yeah.
Ireland. You went there to Ireland. That's right. You went there. This is coming from the guy who went there to give away a bar on the radio. So that's a pretty bold statement.
I saw Peter Gabriel in 1987 in an old Roman arena in Verona, Italy, where there were no chairs, just marble slabs. So I have some concert memories, but I'm telling you, I've seen things in ShipRocked that you will never see again.
Yeah.
Well, obviously it's a place where the people can let their hair down. It's kind of that we give them the idea that this is a kind of a not once in a lifetime, because a lot of bands have been back several times, that it's a chance to do something you just wouldn't be able to get away with maybe at a club or a venue or arena, wherever they're playing.
Can I share a quick memory?
Absolutely.
Yes,
so Jeff Tate was playing in sort of this lounge area doing an acoustic thing, and it was just
Atrium.
him. Yep, Atrium. It was him and Ron Bumblefoot, and that's it. 2 musicians, acoustic guitar, singer. And I don't remember exactly what song it is. We'll say Silent Lucidity just because it's fresh to my mind. But I couldn't help but kind of sing along, and so was everybody else. And I'm like, I'm going to take the harmony here, and I'm in the back of the crowd, and I'm like, wow, somebody else is singing the harmony. And I turn, and it's Jerry Gaskill from King's X, which is one of my absolute top 10 favorite bands in the history of life. And I'm getting the chills. And I went to this show with Ollie Herbert, by the way, God rest his soul, from All That Remains. So I've got Ollie on my left, and we're both pointing at Jerry on our right. And we're like, and I realized this, they aren't names like Led Zeppelin, Metallica, but I loved Ollie. I love All That Remains. I love King's X, and we're singing Queensryche. And then we're looking around, and it's not just us, it's everybody. And we're like, what a shared special moment. Where else are you going to get that?
Well, it's a chance for them to be fans. They're not having to deal with handlers, not having to deal with any kind of tight schedules. It's all very loose. And at that time of the evening, those are usually the later shows. They're done with their work day. So yeah, they're like anybody else. They're a fan. Chad, you have a walk the plank question for Steve here?
I do. So Steve, you've had a lot of experiences, 31 years of radio. You've written 2 books, loved, lost, loved again. What's the most spiritual experience that you can recall that you've had in your life thus far?
Oh boy, this one's going to be tough. All right. So this goes back to, sick wife. She was home, hospice, was expected not to make it more than a couple of days. And I just call it a broken robot because I didn't know what else to do. She had some kind of seizure where, just like I'm crying. I'm thinking, this is it. This is just, I get to watch my wife die now. And I'm absolutely brokenhearted. And, you can't hug a seizure. You got to let the person seize, but you protect, you make sure you don't fall off the bed, whatever. Somewhere in this mess, I when it was all said and done and I was exhausted, I cried myself to sleep. And I don't even remember how I fell asleep, but I fell asleep. And I woke up to, hi, honey, are you okay? What? She's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. Something happened. You wanted spiritual. She was sent home on hospice to die. And after that seizure, she was more or less okay for another 2 years. She lived 2 more incredible years. And we did so many things together. She got to finally meet Chris Cornell. We got to go to shows. We got to do things. I mean, life was tough, you know, it was crazy, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's the closest I've ever been to God right there.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Very special.
What's your favorite quotation, Steve?
Oh, I say this far too often, but God, I mean it so much. When a situation comes up, I say, I love Primus, but I don't want to live in a world where everyone loves Primus. And you can swap out for another weird band like Frank Zappa or whatever, but
Foo Fighters.
It basically means that variety matters, that we have to have differences of opinions. We have to see the world through different eyes and different perspectives, or nothing happens. I don't want you to love the same things I love. I want to love them so I can tell you how much I love them.
Yeah.
The only place that doesn't apply is at an Iron Maiden concert. Anyway.
Yes, you must love Iron Maiden.
You must all, in order to be in this arena of 50,000, you must all love Iron Maiden or get the fuck out.
It's like a Spinal Tap. That could be a Spinal Tap show movie right there. Somebody that stumbled upon an Iron Maiden show that absolutely fucking hates Iron Maiden.
There you go, Steve. Book 3 right there,
out.
buddy.
Yeah.
Lost Somewhere in Time is gonna be the name of your book.
I do love time travel.
Anyway,
or at least time
travel, we've been through almost an hour with you, buddy, and it's been incredibly fascinating. Thank you so much. Thank you, obviously, for sharing some of your very personal stories. It's great for people to hear. It's tough to say, sometimes to remember and bring them back up. But thank you for your honesty and being so candid with that. And thank you for telling us about 31 years in radio. We expect another 31 from you. It's kind of a low impact sport, so you should be okay there. But anyway,
I'll do my best.
Listen, on a personal note, I love you and your wife so dearly. You guys become really good, dear friends to me. And when I was going through some tough issues in my life dealing with family, you guys are both there for me. So I will always be forever in your you guys are always in my heart. Let's put it that way. I'll be obviously in your gratitude, but thank you so much for being a great friend. Thank you for being a great friend of the cruise and always being so supportive of this. You guys have been amazing to us and for us. And again, it's just part of this fabric we call ShipRocked community. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate that.
Yeah, happy to do it. And, you know, Gina and I make each other better people, especially her. She makes me a better person, always has. And we love you guys. The whole family. And I mean, if I can ever do anything for you, reach out.
I think you do it all.
Absolutely.
You're the beacon.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. Listen, guys, if you want to catch this podcast, it's going to be available this Monday. Forgot the date. I get lost when we start getting the September, October. But this coming Monday, 9 a.m. Central, you can find it on our YouTube channel. That's the Ask for Entertainment YouTube channel. You can find it on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you stream music. So do that, guys, real quick. We couldn't have this show happen without, obviously, our host here, Chad Niceville. Thank you, Chad, as always. Our guest, Steve Black. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it again. You giving us your time on this Wednesday. And we, of course, our show producer, Al McManus, our show engineer, Jennifer Zito, our show coordinator, Heather Smith, and the Capitan, Alan Koenig. So thank you all to everyone. This has been an STM podcast production. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a great week. Go see some fucking music and go buy some vinyl. See you guys. Take care.